Thank you for listening to this special edition of Radio Rohan. Again, this is a weekly podcast that we typically do in Spanish, but because we wanted to talk about the important topics that are affecting the Hispanic community along the elections and voter registration, we wanted to make sure that we had an English version so that we could share with friends and family. Look, we all know that in this time of violence, with protests, we want our voice to be heard, we want to take to the streets to create change, and all that is fantastic. But at the end of the day, it won't accomplish anything if we don't vote and change the leaders who are in charge. Look, we know that it's a difficult time for the Hispanic community with our president who's in office. He's very antagonistic to the immigrant community. So this is your opportunity to serve as the voice for those who may not be eligible to vote. We want to make sure that we understand that it's not important enough to have people representing our interests in these different positions, but we want to find Hispanic candidates that are actually willing to run. That's where the true power and true authority lies going forward. Look, we just finished an election here in Georgia where we had as many as 7 Hispanic candidates running for office. Not a single one of them won their seat. We do have one candidate, Zulma Lopez, who is in a runoff, and that is going to happen on August 11th, but that's the last opportunity we have for new Hispanic representation in the state of Georgia or nationwide. The reality is that in this time, there were very few Hispanic voters that took to the ballot box to make sure their voices were heard. Now, we're going to talk with Sam Aguilar later about what some of those reasons might be, but what's important is that you understand that sitting on your sofa at home, feeling sorry for yourself, feeling sorry for the community is not the answer. Whether you can vote or not vote, you need to get involved. You need to invest your hours. You need to invest your dollars in ensuring that the Hispanic community is represented. Look, we can't take for granted the possibility that Trump loses in the November election, because right now the excitement is very high. He has a rally scheduled for Tulsa, Oklahoma this weekend that has a capacity of only 19,000 people, and 800,000 people have registered to attend. It doesn't matter what each day brings in terms of this president and his outlandish ideas. There is a lot of excitement among the Republicans for his candidacy and the upcoming election. The only way to overcome that is to get up, get out, and actually vote. Look, your parents or your parents' parents brought you here to this country so that you could have a better future. They would love the opportunity to vote, but because they're not citizens, they're not eligible to vote. It's your opportunity to thank them. It's your opportunity to be their voice, but you've got to make this happen. We've got to make sure that we get a huge participation number when it comes to the November elections, ensuring that there are representatives that are willing to support or are actually Hispanic in those seats of power. We're going to take a brief break and we're going to come back with Sam Aguilar, who's going to talk to us about what specifically you can do to get involved. As promised, we're back with our guest, Sam Aguilar of Forward.us. Sam, thanks for taking time from your busy day. Tell us a little bit about your background. Why are you on this show and why do we consider you an expert?
Yeah, so professionally I'm the state director for Forward.us, which is a bipartisan policy organization. We lobby both at the state and the federal level to pass immigration reforms that are going to benefit the community. But in my background, I've really volunteered and worked for the advancement of the Latino community here in Georgia, both politically and economically.
Now, in that role, is one of your activities registering people to vote?
Absolutely. I think voter registration and political power, in my mind, is one of the ways, the quickest ways that the Latino community can advance here in the state.
Speaking of supporting Spanish language candidates, we had elections recently in Georgia. How did they go?
Yeah, so I believe we had about 7 Latino or Latina candidates in the state of Georgia running for office. And unfortunately, only one made it to the next phase in the election. So Zulma Lopez, running for a state house seat in the Metro Atlanta area, made it to her runoff. Out of 7 Latino candidates, only 1 was able to advance. And to me, that speaks to the lack of participation in the Latino community when it comes to elections.
You mentioned a runoff. What does that signify for Ms. Lopez?
So Zulma Lopez is running to be the Democratic candidate in the race for her state house seat, right? And so the runoff basically means that now she is in a direct contest with another candidate to be the Democratic candidate. So think about it like being the semifinals to the final being the general election in November.
And when are these semifinal elections going to take place?
So the semifinals, the primary, will be on August 11th, and then the finals, the general election with the presidential, will be on November 18th.
Now, for those who haven't registered yet, is there still time to register before the November general election?
Yes, absolutely. So if you're not registered to vote, you should definitely go ahead and take care of that now. And you can do so at the Secretary of State's website or with other voter participation groups, which I'm happy to share information for.
Thank you for that, Sam. We'll make sure that we put the link in the comments below. For those of you who haven't registered yet, pause the video right now, please. This is so simple. Take a moment to register to vote and make sure that your friends and family who are eligible also take time to register to vote. Now, talking about Spanish issues and Spanish support, it's one thing to support candidates who fight for Spanish issues or Hispanic issues, but it's another thing entirely to actually support Hispanic candidates who are running. Tell us a little bit about that.
So that's a great question. It's actually something that I've changed my mind about recently. And the reason is this, representation matters, absolutely. So when we have Latino candidates, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, when we have Latino candidates that look like, and speak to our community, what we're doing is we are giving our young Latino boys and girls leaders to look up to. We are giving our community a voice at many tables that we don't even know exist, right? So yes, absolutely, I think it matters. We need candidates across the aisle that care about our issues, whether that's the economy, education, or immigration. But at the same time, we badly need Latino and Latina candidates making sure that our community knows we're being represented and that the overall political community understands that Latinos have a seat at these tables.
Now, in talking about participation in these elections, do we have any statistics yet on how many Latinos actually went out to vote in these elections?
So we have exit poll data available, which is not the official government data, but it appears that, again, only between 40 to 50% of the Latino community statewide turned out to vote. And Doug, it's half, right? If this is a classroom, that's a failing grade. So we really need to ask ourselves, what is it that is impeding our community from coming out to vote?
Well, I'll go ahead and ask that. What is it that's impeding our community from going out to vote?
So I can tell you what people say, and that it is a lack of education and a lack of trust sort of in political systems, a lack of knowledge around the issues, or people feeling that they don't know enough to make a difference. But finally, I think a lot of it is apathy. A lot of it is low energy, and people, quite frankly, not being aware of how important elections are and how big of a difference they can make in our communities.
Are there some organizations here in Georgia that help with that education and awareness?
Definitely. So the two that I would highly recommend, the GALEO, Georgia Association of Latino Elected Officials, and then the Latino Community Fund, both based out of Metro Atlanta, but I think are doing amazing work across the state, not only listening to the needs of the Latino community, but then also pushing for their representation at all levels of government.
Now look, we're sympathetic to the fact that not everybody listening to this video has the capacity to vote legally in this country. Is there still a place or a role for these individuals to become active in the process?
I know that being disenfranchised, whether because of citizenship status or other reasons, is heartbreaking. However, you can still be involved. You can still help your community be represented. I think a great example of this is the Dreamers, DACA recipients in the United States. They do not have the ability to vote. However, we still see them in the news. We still see them in state courthouses. We see them at the Supreme Court. The visibility that the Dreamer movement has should be an example for all Latino Americans, all immigrant Americans that aren't able to vote, to get out there, to be involved, to talk with your community, volunteer, register voters. I think that's a great example of how communities that aren't able to vote can still have a voice and still be involved in the democratic process.
Now that's a great point. Look, we support the Dreamers, we love the Dreamers, we employ the Dreamers. But that's talking about what other people are doing generally. For those who are listening to this video, what's the direct action that they personally can take?
Volunteer to register voters. Volunteer to knock on doors for your candidates. Learn more about the democratic process and be engaged. Also, if you have the means, monetary donations to organizations doing a lot of this great work. And finally, just educating your community. Be passionate about who you are, what you stand for, and what you want out of your government.
Now you mentioned volunteering. Zulma Lopez, who is the last Latina candidate that's still viable for a spot, has in fact asked specifically for more volunteers, for more financial support. We'll make sure that, again, we put in the links below her information so you can reach out to her. Get personally involved. Call her, reach out to her, find out how you can canvass, support her, hand out flyers, and make phone calls. This is something that everybody listening can do. Now, Sam, thank you very much for taking time out of your day to go ahead and share this information with us. Are there any final thoughts that you have that you want to share with us?
Yeah, one final word I would say for the impassioned advocates and folks that might be tired, quite frankly, of what feels like losing in this democratic battle, is to be compassionate. As we bring new people into the movement, as we create new voters and new constituents, let's make sure that we're compassionate and we're bringing them and educating them and catching them up to what we're doing instead of speaking from our high horses and pushing people away from the movement.
Sam, thank you. You make a very good point, and that's something I want to expand on. For those who are activists, you're involved in this daily. You're very knowledgeable about what's going on, who's running for what seats. Make sure as you're bringing other people into this process that you're making them feel welcome. Don't shame them or don't tell them they haven't been doing enough. Welcome the fact that they want to now get involved. We need to make sure that more people are included in this democratic process. So thank you again, Sam, for your time. And for the rest of you, again, you have some homework to do. First of all, as we mentioned, register to vote. Take the time out to a few minutes to fill in the data. You do have time before the November elections to make sure that your voice can be heard. Second, share this video with your friends and your family. Remember, you who are eligible to vote now are here to give voice to your parents, to your family members who aren't eligible to vote. They brought you here to this country so that you could have a better future. It's your turn to pay them back for that opportunity they've given you. Speak on their behalf. Be active. Participate in this democratic process. Make sure that the people who are in office are going to support the Latinx future that we want to create for yourself and for your children. Thank you for listening to this version of Radio Rohan Directo a la Comunidad, this special edition that we did in English. This is our weekly podcast that's generally in Spanish. We're here every Thursday night at 9 p.m. to share information that's important to the Hispanic community that we feel will help you to have a better future here. Now is your turn to have a better future and to live a better future that your parents and your family members have sought for you. Share this video, register to vote, and join us next week in Radio Rohan Directo a la Comunidad.